You are not losing them, you are losing yourself. And the more you try to hold on, the faster they pull away. That pattern feels personal, it feels painful, and it feels confusing. One moment they are warm, the next they are distant, and you are left trying to fix something you cannot even fully understand. If you have felt ignored, drained, or stuck in a cycle where you give more and receive less, there is a reason behind it, and it runs deeper than simple compatibility. Because anxious people do not fail in love by accident, they follow patterns they do not even see. Patterns that feel like love but slowly turn into self-abandonment. Patterns that seem caring but actually create pressure. And here is the part most people never talk about. The harder you try to prove your love to an avoidant person, the more their instinct tells them to create distance. It is a hidden psychological loop. One person moves closer, the other steps back. And without realizing it, you train them to value you less over time. In this video, you will learn the 6 most common mistakes anxious people make with avoidance. These are quiet mistakes, subtle behaviors, the kind that feel right in the moment but slowly damage attraction, respect, and emotional connection. You will understand why chasing pushes them away, why explaining your feelings can make them shut down, and why seeking reassurance often creates the exact distance you fear. More importantly, you will learn how to break this cycle without becoming cold or distant yourself. There is also a deeper truth that many people miss. Avoidants do feel, they do care, but they respond to energy in a completely different way. When you understand that difference, everything starts to make sense. The confusion fades, the emotional chaos settles. And for the first time, you begin to see your own value clearly again. Stay until the end, because the final shift will change how you see yourself in relationships. It is the moment where everything clicks, where you stop chasing, stop overgiving, and start standing in a place of calm control. That is where attraction begins to rebuild. That is where respect returns. Welcome to our channel. If you are ready to understand your patterns, protect your energy, and build stronger connections, subscribe now and stay with us. There is a hidden structure behind everything you are experiencing, and once you see it, the confusion begins to clear. This is not random behavior, and it is not simply about the other person being distant or unavailable. There are specific patterns that shape how this dynamic unfolds, and most people fall into them without realizing it. These patterns feel natural in the moment. They feel like the right thing to do when you care about someone. But over time, they begin to shift how the other person sees you, how they respond to you, and how much emotional space you occupy in their life. What makes this even more complicated is that these behaviors are often driven by good intentions. You are trying to connect, to fix, to understand, to hold things together. You are responding to distance with effort, to silence with communication, to uncertainty with reassurance. From your side, it feels like you are protecting the relationship, but from their side, it can feel overwhelming, heavy, and difficult to engage with. And that difference in perception slowly changes the balance between you. These 6 mistakes slowly destroy your value in their eyes. Not because you are doing something wrong as a person, but because the way you respond begins to reduce the sense of challenge, independence, and emotional space that they need to stay engaged. Attraction, especially with avoidant personalities, often grows in space and fades under pressure. When that pressure builds, even in subtle ways, it creates a quiet resistance that you cannot always see directly. At the same time, these patterns push you deeper into emotional exhaustion. You start giving more energy than you receive. You think more, you feel more, you invest more, while getting less clarity in return. It becomes draining in a way that is hard to explain because you are constantly trying to stabilize something that keeps shifting. And instead of feeling secure, you feel more anxious, more uncertain, more dependent on their responses. Without awareness, this cycle continues on its own. Each reaction leads to another reaction, each step pulling you further into the same dynamic where your effort increases and your sense of control slowly fades. It starts in a way that feels simple. You care deeply, you want closeness, you want connection that feels steady and real. That is how an anxious person loves. There is intensity, there is effort, There is a constant desire to feel secure, but the person on the other side moves differently. They value space, they protect their independence, and too much emotional closeness begins to feel overwhelming to them. That is the avoidant side. One moves closer to feel safe, the other pulls back to feel safe. One chases, the other escapes. At first, it feels like a small imbalance. You send a message, expecting warmth, expecting engagement. You text more, they reply less. You try to open up, to explain how you feel, to create deeper understanding. You open up, they shut down. The more honest you become, the quieter they get. And the silence starts to feel heavy. It starts to feel like rejection, even when it is simply their way of coping with intensity. So you try harder. You give more time, more attention, more emotional energy. You think if you just show them enough care, they will meet you halfway. But instead of bringing you closer, it slowly creates distance. Their replies become shorter, their presence becomes inconsistent, and without even noticing, your focus shifts completely onto them. Every message, every pause, every small change begins to control your mood. And then something even deeper begins to happen. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you said too much. Maybe you felt too much. Maybe you are asking for too much. And somehow, you start blaming yourself. You begin to shrink parts of who you are just to keep the connection alive. You hold back your thoughts, you overthink your words, you try to become easier to handle, easier to stay with. But the cycle keeps repeating. The more you adjust, the more uncertain things feel. The more you try to fix it, the more it slips away. And it leaves you stuck in a loop where you are constantly reacting, constantly trying to restore something that never feels stable. But the real problem is not your feelings, it is how you react to theirs. The first mistake begins so quietly that it feels like the most natural reaction in the world. They start to pull away, their energy changes, their presence becomes less consistent, and something inside you immediately wants to close the gap. You send another message, you try to bring the conversation back to life, you lean in a little more, hoping to restore what was there before. It feels like effort, like care, like doing the right thing to keep the connection alive. But something shifts the moment you do this. The more you move closer, the more they feel trapped. From their side, that increase in attention does not feel comforting. It feels like pressure building up. They begin to associate your presence with expectation, with emotional demand, with a sense that they are being pulled into something they are not ready to handle. So instead of meeting you halfway, they create even more distance. Their replies get shorter, their tone becomes colder, their availability starts to shrink, and without realizing it, your response becomes even stronger. You try harder, you reach out more, you push for clarity, hoping that more effort will bring them back. But chasing does not create connection, it creates pressure. It turns something that could have been natural into something that feels forced. It removes the space that allows attraction to breathe, and the more that space disappears, the more their instinct tells them to step back and protect it. This is where the cycle tightens. You feel distance, so you move closer. They feel pressure, so they move further away. Each reaction feeds the other. What makes this even more difficult is how personal it feels. Their distance starts to feel like rejection, like a sign that something is wrong with you or the connection. So your instinct is to fix it immediately, to close the silence, to bring things back to how they were. But in this dynamic, space is not rejection, it is where attraction resets. When there is distance, there is room for curiosity, for missing someone, for emotional balance to return. When that space is constantly filled, there is no chance for that reset to happen, and everything begins to feel heavier with every interaction. The second mistake often comes from a genuine desire to be understood. When something feels off, when their energy changes or their responses become distant, you feel the need to explain yourself more clearly. You write longer messages, you go deeper into your emotions, you try to express every thought in a way that leaves no room for confusion. It feels honest, it feels open, and it feels like the right way to fix the growing distance. You believe that if they truly understand how you feel, everything will settle again. But something unexpected happens in this process. The more you explain, the less they feel. What is meant to create clarity begins to create emotional overload. Avoidant personalities tend to process emotions internally and at a slower pace. When they are faced with intense, detailed expressions of feelings, especially all at once, it does not pull them closer. It makes them retreat. They begin to shut down, not because they do not care, but because the intensity becomes difficult to hold. From your side, this silence feels confusing. You just opened up, you just shared something meaningful, and instead of connection, you receive distance. So the instinct is to explain even more, to clarify your intentions, to add context, to make sure they do not misunderstand you. Each message becomes longer, more detailed, more emotionally charged, and with every step, the gap quietly widens. Avoidants disconnect when overwhelmed emotionally. It is not always visible at first. They may respond briefly, they may acknowledge what you said, but something in their energy shifts. The natural flow disappears. The conversation starts to feel heavy, like something they need to manage instead of something they want to be part of. And over time, they begin to associate your openness with emotional weight rather than comfort. There is also a subtle shift in how you present yourself. The more you try to explain everything, the more it feels like you are seeking validation, like you need them to understand you in order to feel stable. That need begins to replace the natural balance that creates attraction. Not everything needs to be said, some things need to be shown through behavior. When actions remain calm, steady, and consistent, they communicate far more than long explanations ever could, and they do it without creating the pressure that pushes the other person away. The third mistake grows slowly, almost unnoticed at first. It begins with a small need for clarity, a simple desire to feel secure in the connection. When their behavior becomes inconsistent or distant, your mind starts searching for certainty. You want to hear the words that bring stability back. So you ask questions that feel completely reasonable from your side. Do you still love me? Are we okay? Is everything fine between us? In those moments, reassurance feels like relief. It feels like something that can calm the anxiety and bring things back into place. But over time, this pattern begins to change the energy of the relationship. What once felt natural starts to feel like something that needs constant maintenance. The emotional responsibility quietly shifts onto them. Instead of experiencing connection freely, they begin to feel like they are being asked to manage your emotional state. And that shift is subtle but powerful. It turns attraction into responsibility. From your perspective, you are asking for something simple: a little clarity, a little consistency, a little confirmation that things are still intact. But from their perspective, especially if they lean avoidant, it can feel like pressure building over time. Each question carries an expectation. Each moment of doubt asks them to step in and stabilize something that feels unstable. And instead of bringing them closer, it creates a quiet resistance that grows with each repetition. Reassurance feels like love to you, but pressure to them. That difference in experience creates a gap that is hard to notice while you are inside it. You believe you are strengthening the connection by checking in, by asking, by seeking confirmation. But the more often it happens, the more it signals uncertainty. It shifts how they see you, how they respond to you, and how they feel when interacting with you. There is also a change in how you carry yourself. The more you rely on reassurance, the less grounded you begin to feel on your own. Your emotional state starts to depend on their answers, their tone, their availability, and that dependence becomes visible even in small ways. Confidence is silent. Neediness is loud. It shows up in timing, in repetition, in the subtle urgency behind your words, and it slowly reshapes the dynamic without a clear moment where everything changes. The fourth mistake happens so gradually that it feels like adjustment rather than loss. At the beginning, you are simply being flexible. You make small compromises, you give a little more time, you shift your priorities just enough to keep things smooth. It feels like care, like effort, like doing what relationships require. But over time, those small adjustments begin to stack. You start thinking about their needs before your own, you begin to shape your behavior around their moods, and without noticing it, your sense of balance starts to fade. Your routines change, your focus narrows, things that once mattered to you begin to take a back seat. You respond quicker, you wait longer, You become more available than you used to be. It feels like you are protecting the connection, but in reality, you are slowly stepping away from yourself. The space that once held your identity, your interests, your independence, starts to shrink. And the more it shrinks, the more your emotional world begins to revolve around them. You slowly disappear, trying to keep them. It does not happen in one moment. It happens in small decisions, repeated over time. You hold back opinions to avoid tension. You ignore discomfort to keep things stable. You accept less than what you need because you are focused on not losing what you have. And while you are doing all of this, something important shifts in how they see you. Self-abandonment lowers value. When you stop standing in your own space, when you stop expressing your own needs, the dynamic changes. There is less mystery, less independence, less of the grounded presence that naturally creates attraction. Instead, your energy begins to feel centered around them, shaped by them, dependent on them. And even if they cannot fully explain it, they start to feel that shift. The moment you stop choosing yourself, they stop choosing you too. Not in a sudden or obvious way, but in small, subtle changes. Their effort becomes less consistent. Their attention becomes less focused. The connection begins to feel one-sided, even though you are giving more than ever. And the more you try to regain that balance by giving even more, the further you move away from the version of yourself that once made the connection feel natural and easy. The fifth mistake begins when inconsistency starts to feel normal. One day they are present, engaged, and warm, and the next day they feel distant, distracted, or completely unavailable. At first, it feels confusing, but also intriguing. Those moments of attention feel valuable because they are unpredictable. When they show up, it feels intense. When they pull back, it creates a gap that keeps your focus locked on them. This pattern of hot and cold slowly becomes the rhythm of the connection. You begin to adjust around it. You hold on to the good moments and try to understand the distance. When they give you a little attention, it feels meaningful. When they disappear, you wait. You tell yourself they are busy, that they need space, that things will return to how they were. And during that waiting, your emotional investment grows even stronger. Small gestures start to feel significant because they are rare. This is where the dynamic quietly shifts. You are no longer responding to consistency, you are reacting to unpredictability. Breadcrumbs become enough to keep you engaged. A short message, a brief moment of closeness, a small sign of interest feels like progress. And without realizing it, your expectations begin to lower. You stop looking for steady effort and start holding on to occasional attention. You do not fall for them, you fall for their potential. You hold on to the version of them that appears in those brief moments of warmth. You believe that version is real and consistent, even when their actions show something different over time. That belief keeps you connected, even when the overall experience feels unstable. Inconsistency creates addiction. The unpredictable nature of their behavior keeps your mind engaged, always waiting for the next moment of connection. It pulls you deeper into the cycle, where you are constantly trying to regain the feeling you had before, and the more unpredictable it becomes, the more your attention stays fixed on it. What you tolerate becomes your relationship. The patterns that continue without challenge begin to define the connection itself. The ups and downs stop feeling temporary and start becoming the foundation of how everything operates, shaping your reactions, your expectations, and the way you experience every interaction moving forward. The sixth mistake shows up in the moments where everything goes quiet. There is a pause in the conversation, a delay in replies, a stretch of time where nothing is said, and it immediately feels uncomfortable. That silence starts to carry meaning. It feels heavy, like something is slipping away, like the connection is fading. So the instinct is to fill it as quickly as possible. You send another message, you bring up a new topic, you try to keep the flow alive so that the distance never fully forms. At first, it feels like you are maintaining the connection. You are keeping things active, keeping the energy moving, making sure there is always a line between you and them. But over time, this habit begins to remove something important. It takes away the natural rhythm of space in return. Every gap that could have allowed curiosity or interest to rebuild gets filled before it has a chance to exist, and slowly the interaction starts to feel constant but less meaningful. Silence feels like loss to you, but control to them. When there is always a message waiting, always a response ready, the balance of distance stays in their hands. They decide when to reply, how much to engage, how long to stay present. There is no moment where they feel the absence of you, no space where your presence becomes something they notice missing, and without that contrast, your value begins to feel constant, predictable, always available. Avoidants are uncomfortable when they do not control the distance. When the space appears on its own, when there is a pause they did not create, it shifts something internally. It brings a sense of uncertainty that they are not used to managing. But when you constantly fill that silence, you remove that shift entirely. The dynamic stays one-sided, where you respond to distance instead of allowing it to exist on its own. So the pattern continues. You feel the silence, you react to it, you close the gap, and each time it reinforces the same cycle where your presence becomes steady, but their engagement remains selective. Silence is not empty, it is powerful. It holds space for emotion to settle, for attention to reset, for the natural pull of connection to return without force or pressure. At a certain point, the focus begins to shift inward. The patterns start to become visible, and the need to constantly respond, explain, and adjust slowly loses its grip. There is a realization that changing your behavior does not mean losing your warmth or becoming distant. You do not need to become cold, you need to become grounded. Grounded in how you feel, grounded in what you need, and grounded in the way you show up without constantly reacting to every change in their behavior. This shift is subtle but powerful. Instead of chasing, you pause. Instead of filling every silence, you allow space to exist. Instead of trying to control the outcome, you begin to focus on your own stability. Your attention moves away from what they are doing and returns to how you are choosing to respond. That change alone starts to reshape the entire dynamic. The urgency fades, the pressure disappears, and your presence becomes calmer, more balanced, less dependent on their reactions. You start choosing yourself in small but consistent ways. You keep your routines, you protect your time, you stay connected to the parts of your life that exist outside of the relationship. Your mood is no longer controlled by the timing of their messages or the tone of their responses. There is a sense of steadiness that begins to build, and it shows in how you communicate, how you wait, and how you engage. You are still open, still genuine, but there is a quiet strength underneath it that does not seek constant validation. As this happens, something else begins to change. The dynamic that once felt one-sided starts to rebalance. When you stop reacting, you start attracting. The space you allow creates room for them to move toward you on their own. The absence of pressure makes interaction feel lighter, more natural, easier to return to. And without forcing anything, the energy shifts from pursuit to presence, where connection begins to grow from a place that feels steady rather than strained. And in the end, this is where everything becomes clear. Avoidants do not regret losing people who chase them, they regret losing people who finally stop. The ones who no longer run after every moment of distance, the ones who no longer try to fix every silence, the ones who step back, stay steady, and choose themselves without needing permission. Because silence is something they do not know how to control. When you are always there, always responding, always reaching out, the dynamic stays predictable. But when that pattern breaks, when your energy becomes calm and grounded, it creates a shift they can feel. It is quiet, but it is powerful. Your absence is no longer filled with effort. It is filled with presence. And that is where everything begins to change. And the moment you stop losing yourself is the moment everything changes. The need to chase fades. The need to prove disappears. What remains is a version of you that feels stable, clear, and in control of your own space. That energy speaks louder than any message, any explanation, any attempt to hold on. Have you ever tried staying silent instead of chasing? Or are you still stuck in the cycle? If this opened your eyes, take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.